Rumors spreading round.
Welcome back to the C.L. Bryant Show. This is Mike Wood sitting in for C.L. Bryant. Tonight we have on the phone with us Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser, and to give you a quick background on Billy's history, because there is nobody in the state of Louisiana who is more qualified to head up the recovery effort than Billy. He was elected parish president of Plaquemine Parish in 2006 and spent the first 2 years in office dealing with the results of Katrina and Rita. He was proactive prior to the 2008 hurricane season with Gustav and Ike. He then dealt with the Deepwater Horizon spill and was reelected again as parish president and then elected lieutenant governor. Billy, we are glad to have you on the phone.
Glad to be with you again. You doing good tonight?
I'm doing great, man. You've been with the president today.
Yes, we had a short visit at the airport and before they went on the tour. And, he had remembered the many times we spent visiting during the oil spill. And so I was very glad to see him here in Louisiana.
One of the great things we've been talking about, and it's obvious with the appointment of you by Governor Edwards, disasters unfortunately do have a strange effect of bringing people together and working across the aisle, and we have all got to work together in this deal, or it's not going to work out.
Absolutely, and that's the thing that I've been telling people. The floodwaters don't know if you're Republican, Democrat, rich or poor, black or white. It hit everyone across the board, and unless we band together, and as we saw in the efforts to rescue people and in the gutting of homes, which continues as we speak, neighbor helping neighbor, incredible acts of unselfishness, bravery. We can get through this and be better than ever, but we've got to all be pulling in the same direction.
Well, let me ask you, Billy. Hi, Billy. A lot of people were anticipating the president's arrival today. What do you think came out of him being there, and how is that going to help the recovery effort?
Well, what I stressed to the president was, Mr. President, FEMA maps told these people they didn't need flood insurance. They were not in a flood zone. So those recommendations through the federal mapping system by FEMA told them they didn't need flood insurance. So there should be some obligation by the federal government to come in and offer some kind of assistance because under the present law, $33,000 is the maximum you can get, and the average is about $7,000. That's not going to rebuild a home, and many of these people are elderly and poor on fixed income, and there's no way they'll get back in their home. Now, we are not waiting for that to change. We are working with nonprofits, faith-based groups, gutting homes, and working on donations to buy materials. And through AmeriCorps and Volunteer Louisiana, we're working with those groups and planning on, as we gut homes, to help rebuild them. But it sure would be nice if we could get some kind of grant from the federal government to help these people out.
Well, to summarize some of the statistics we've heard, that only 12% of the people that were affected had flood insurance. And this is really new to both Mike and I, that you're saying that FEMA recommended that flood insurance not be required. And Mike, you're a lawyer. I mean, does that make sense to think that if somebody said, well, you don't need to have flood insurance and we have a 500-year flood and wham, you're out, don't they have to give a little bit of support?
Well, let me give you the other side of the story. When I served on the Recovery Authority, we were criticized frequently because we went in and redid floodplain maps, and of course that then made some folks property no longer developable, and so we got a lot of flack for that. But I see that FEMA is already recommending that you have a raise the base of your house up to accommodate future floods, and so that there's going to be a lot of back and forth on this.
But are you seeing a lot of people going to the volunteer site that you've gotten, and also the donation site? Or is just a flood of support coming in?
It's absolutely incredible, and we need it to continue. We're reaching out. I put a call into the Saints organization. We would like to coordinate an effort at the Saints New York game to ask everybody to go to their phones and make a donation at that event up in New York. We went up and helped after Sandy in New York and New Jersey, and we want to reach out to those people to help us in this time of need. And I think because of the kindness of people across America, and especially here in Louisiana, we're seeing unprecedented donations and people lending a helping hand, that at the end we will be better than we were before this horrible flood, and we'll make everybody get them back in their homes.
The website that Billy is referring to is www.volunteerlouisiana.gov. So if you want to make a monetary donation, that is one of the places you can go. Also, any group or corporation intending to donate, cook, or serve food can email donate@crt.la.gov, and they'll be connected to the parish nearest them with the most need.
So, Billy, like right now, this is just a few days into it, and there seems to be stages of recovery, and you do have a lot of experience with this. But what should we look for the next week, and what can our listeners do? Do we need to start talking to our congressmen? You know, Mike was talking to me earlier about that. In order to open up purse strings, it takes an act of Congress. Or is it too premature to even be thinking about that right now?
Well, I think our congressmen are engaged. Gary Graves and Senator Cassidy was there today, and Senator Vitter was there, and Cedric Richmond. We've got a great team that's working hard for us, but it's more than Louisiana. I will be reaching out as soon as we know what our ask is. As a Republican lieutenant governor, there's 32 of us. If I can get some help from those Republican lieutenant governors, that's 64 senators. We can change the world. So I'm hoping to use that group to really rally support, not only for this issue, for many issues, to engage their senators on things in their states that are important to all of us. But that will be a great mechanism for me to at least get the message to their local senators to get on board and support our efforts.
Well, and you've got a track record. You went to FEMA early on in 06 and fought for, I think they were going to give Plaquemine Parish $400,000, and you ended up getting 12. We're coming up on a break. Billy, can you stay with us through the break?
I sure will. Thank you.
All right. This is Mike Wood sitting in for C.L. Bryant. We have Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser on the line, and he will be right back with us after the break. Thanks. Welcome back to the CL Bryant Show. This is Mike Wood sitting in for CL. We have Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser on the phone with us, and during the break, Michelle and Billy were talking about some of the issues that they're dealing with. Billy, why don't you talk a little bit about debris removal and disease issues and water problems and all the infrastructure issues that go along with floods?
Well, Craig Fugate, when it was first down here, the head of FEMA and the head of health and hospitals was talking about the possibility or the ability to be able to spray and treat for mosquitoes right after this disaster and make sure we control the mosquito population. With a nod of his head, he approved additional funding, federal funding, to make sure we keep the mosquito population under control. And that was a good thing, because although the Zika thing down in Florida, we surely will have a lot of standing water that we'll need to treat and spray for mosquitoes to keep that deadly disease out of Louisiana. And along with that and the dirty water, run the risk of bacteria infection. And of course, we've been distributing masks for removing the sheetrock and all, with the mold situation in many homes can make you sick. And the volunteer groups actually train the volunteers how to safely go in and remove and gut these homes and do it in a safe manner. So the groups that are working with the church groups and organizing these activities are doing a great job at doing it safely.
And the logistics of the utility companies, I mean, people don't realize when homes flood and you turn off electricity and you turn off natural gas, you don't then just go back and turn everything back on, because people's pilot lights are out, people have damage to their electrical outlets in their house. So it's not just flipping a switch and getting things going again. How is that coming along?
Well, there again, the parishes, as long as we get someone to vouch that the house is ready to go back on, it won't require, they're waiving the permitting fees. So all the local governments and the utility companies are working great together as partners. So I got to tell you, going through 5 hurricanes down in Plaquemines Parish, Entergy, the gas company have been great partners, and they're out there in force. Although it probably never gets back on as quick as people would like it, those men and women that work for the gas company and electrical company, they're out there working long hours because they want the power back on. So you see them on a truck, thank them. Although it never happens quick enough when your power's out, we've got a great team across Louisiana. They live here in Louisiana too, so it's their home as well, and they're working hard to get that power back on.
That's what's always so amazing. Oftentimes they're getting electricity on in your house, and they don't have it in their own house.
And we've seen that. Listen, I visited with many law enforcement, sheriffs, firemen, state troopers, guardsmen, that their homes flooded, and they're out there doing the job, rescuing people, helping people. And it's just an incredible sense of duty in what they do across Louisiana. With all this tragedy, it makes me so proud the way they step up and really go to bat.
And it seems that FEMA learned from Katrina, and they're really on the ball this time. Is that what you're seeing?
I'm sorry, I lost you there.
Yeah, it seems that FEMA learned a lesson from Katrina, and they have got their act together this time.
Oh, they have done. Listen, up to this point, I have no complaint. They've been on every helicopter, every tour out into the field, from the first helicopter ride with the governor to every early morning meeting. Things I never saw with Katrina, and Craig Fugate being down here today, as well. He was down here last week, really hands-on, making sure, and the team really seems to care. The people at FEMA before it was like, how can we tell you no? Now it's, how can we tell you to make this work? And so I have been very impressed with the team FEMA has. and the job they've done.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time. I know you're busy and we kind of squeezed in to get this information. We're going to continue to give out these websites as we have been since last week. And we're going to check back in with you in a couple days, probably the beginning of next week. And we want to be a partner with you up here in North Louisiana and make Louisiana great for all of us.
You've been a great friend and a great partner. I love what y'all do. Call me anytime. God bless you.
God bless you, Billy. Appreciate your work. Thank you, my friend.
Bye-bye.
Well, we're extremely fortunate to have Billy down there because it's as if he has been on the job training since his first election to Plaquemine Parish President in 06.
And the good news is, in his point of view, and he's not selling us anything. He's already got the job, so it's not like he's running for something. He's saying it's good news.
Yep.
Give out those websites again for our listeners.
Yes, www.volunteerlouisiana.gov is where you need to go for monetary donations. For food, any group or corporation intending to donate, cook, or serve food can email donate@crt.la.gov, and they'll be connected to the parish nearest them or with the most need. And then if you're a volunteer, any individual or group wanting to volunteer can go to www.volunteerlouisiana.gov and register.
And then what he told us last week, you register at that website, and then they put you in touch. They give that information to nonprofits that are sending people down there. But there's Samaritan Purse, Samaritan
Purse through Franklin Graham, and I had the privilege of working with Franklin Graham during Katrina. Franklin had a huge operation up here in Shreveport. Dr. Philip Roseman headed up the medical group there at Hirsch. I housed 2 doctors for about 3 months at my house who were with Samaritan's Purse. And the Southern Baptist Convention has a relief group that is down there taking sheetrock out and remediating and mold. There are other faith-based groups again that were on the conference call yesterday that are all rallying to the cause.
Well, and a lot of the people that were volunteering last week, not just the first responders, but the churches and the volunteers inside the church. Their homes were flooded, but they were out volunteering.
And their churches as well.
Yes.
And their schools. They're saying the Baker School will be closed for a year. I mean, there's some long-term implications from this flood that
so we just need to have
continue.
some fortitude. This is going to be a long journey.
It's not going to happen overnight, but hopefully we will come back better and stronger. This is Mike Woods. I'm sitting in for C.L. Bryant with Michelle here on the C.L. Bryant Show, and we will be back after the break.
Broadcasting from the Bayou State and all around the Gulf Coast and streaming nationwide. This is The C.L. Bryant Show.
Welcome back to the C.L. Bryant Show. This is Mike Woods sitting in for C.L. tonight, and Michelle and I were, during the break, we're talking about the presidential election coming up, and the question came up, where is Hillary in all of this? And the interesting thing, Michelle, is we have determined back in 2007, Hillary ran an ad in South Carolina asking the African-American voters, where was George Bush, that he was invisible during Katrina, that he didn't care about them and didn't deserve our vote. And yet, where has Hillary been?
Where's Hillary? It's a new game. Do you remember Where's Waldo? This one's called Where's Hillary?
Well, it's been interesting, and of course, Donald Trump was criticized early on for being the first down because it was just all about publicity, and then the tune was changed regarding that. And today, President Obama came in, and you heard Lieutenant Governor Nungesser talking about the president's visit, and was greeted by both the Democratic governor and two U.S. Republican senators, Cassidy and Vitter, as well as Garrett Graves. We've had an interesting conversation yesterday with Steve Scalise and the faith-based group as they were trying to come up with an effort to help. But where has Hillary been in this?
Well, she's been doing a lot of fundraising. So over the weekend, we can talk about that. You love this, and people need to know also that you've been a fundraiser in the Republican Party on a national level for decades. Your father brought presidents to Shreveport, the
Yes.
Bushes, etc. So fundraising is something that you're familiar with. And so she was in Martha's Vineyard this weekend, and we just need to set this up. And those plates were, how much were I know the one in California is $33,000 and some change per person.
I think this was $50,000 plate, but she had a 20-mile trip to make from Martha's Vineyard to
and she
Nantucket.
walked because she's into the environment, so she rode a bike. Is that what you're saying?
No, she actually flew in a Gulfstream jet for the 20 minutes. I promise you, it took her longer to drive to the airport and taxi out to the runway than the time that she was actually in the air. And I don't know what kind of fuel burn a Gulfstream has for a 20-minute low-level flight, but it just epitomizes, Hillary continues to tell us that she is of the people and for the people.
The Democrat Party platform is supposedly about empowering the small person, but the only empowering they do two things. They support their elitism, which means that you have to be able to pay $33,000 a person. How many Democrats that she's supposed to be helping can do that? Or they like to keep them on welfare and teach them the skill of not working instead of how to take care of themselves.
Well, access is expensive, as we are finding out through the Clinton Foundation, and of course Donald Trump has been jumping up and down asking for the investigation into the Clinton Foundation as we continue now to come out with 15,000 more emails.
Well,
I thought
why
she had
would
turned
Donald
them all
Trump
over.
have to be the one asking for this? We should all be asking. And just like the plane ride for 20 minutes, that should be the top of the news. Saying this person is running for your president. Is this how an American servant leader, which is what the president of the United States is, if there's ever an office that's a servant leader, it's the president of the United States. That's what the founding fathers intended, not a king. She's acting like royalty and that we're the serfs.
Well, and I've heard others use the expression, if she is elected, that she's not going to be the president, she's going to be the godfather, and she's very vindictive, and she is going to come back on those who she feels have.
And we haven't even ever covered that on the air. We do that a lot on social media, all the people that are mysteriously no more. And we get the biggest results when we post those kind of things. But these are actual factual things. We're not against Hillary. We don't agree with these policies. I don't know her personally, but I don't think I could be friends with somebody that lives in a double standard. Like in Hollywood, $33,000 a plate. What are they going to talk about, Mike, at this fundraiser? About how to help the poor? You know what they could have done? She could take the money from these fundraisers and give it to the victims in South Louisiana. Well, how hard would it be for somebody on her staff to say, look, you're already doing all these fundraisers. Why don't we just give the proceeds to people instead of, what do they use it for? Salaries for campaign staff, bodyguards, commercials. None of those things help the American people.
But she was very generous last year, Michelle. She gave over $1 million to charity out of her $13 million worth of income.
And what charity was that, Mr.
Well,
Woods?
it was the Clinton Foundation that benefits the Clintons. You know, people. I don't know. I'm looking at their daughter Chelsea, who just bought a $10 million condo in the Flatiron Building in New York. Her husband is a former hedge fund manager whose hedge fund went bankrupt, by the way. But Chelsea is the age of my daughter, and my daughter doesn't live in a $10 million condo in New York, and you wonder, where does Chelsea get her money from?
Or when the Clintons left the White House, and she
They
just
were
talked
poor.
about this
They were
again.
broke.
She just reiterated this story. We were broke and we couldn't pay for all of our houses.
Well, last year they only made $13 million because the previous year they made 25, but they had to cut back on some of their speaking engagements. So that's
and these
why.
some of these are schools that have a very low budget. And we've talked about this on the air even 2 years ago when we started talking about her speaking fees, because we knew she was running for president. And why isn't the nightly media talking about the reality of the lifestyle of Hillary and Bill Clinton? Why are we having to sound like they pretend that everybody that says these things is a nut, and yet they jump on some of the crazy things that Trump says, and I'll have to hand it to him. He says some things that
He's pretty good at it.
Oh my God! And I don't understand why he is on Twitter tweeting some of the nonsense that he tweets. He just, I mean, seriously, like he took on the Morning Joe show this morning, and it's embarrassing. I don't understand. And again, I've said this behind the scenes. If I were married to him, he wouldn't have that cell phone. I wouldn't need his campaign people to take it from him. I would do it myself. I would unload the Twitter app, and he'd never be able to do it again. But why isn't the media talking about this, Mike?
Well, why aren't they talking about the foundation COO Laura Graham leaving 148 messages on Chief of Staff Cheryl Mills' phone? I mean, why would the foundation COO be calling the State Department? Because she wanted access. And when you look at some of, she was trying to get access for the Crown Prince and others. And when you look behind the scenes, the foundation, to allow a foundation to have an entity in Canada that doesn't require disclosure of who gives, giving millions of dollars into the foundation, you look at the monies that have actually been given for the reasons that the quote foundation exists. Less than 15% of the monies raised actually have gone to the charitable intent of the foundation. The rest have gone.
So we can't see basically all the expenditures, but we can see where the money went and what money came in, and we can just guess what happened to the remainder.
Well, we can't even see where all the money came in, because the monies that came out of the foundation that was founded in Canada, they're not required to disclose. So there may have been some entities that were not legally able to give.
President Nixon and Spiro Agnew did a lot less than this, and she was part of the investigation committee for Watergate. And here we are with Clinton Gate, and nobody's talking about it.
45 years of ethic lapses, scandals, and corruption. I mean, this goes back to how she made $100,000 in
So then
cattle
how is
futures.
this woman getting so much support for president? How is that even possible? Is it felons in Virginia that's going to vote for her?
Well, that's a good start. And of course, we've done away with the North Carolina voter ID, and you see George Soros pouring money in to register anybody and everybody. So it's an interesting time we live in, Michelle. We'll be back. We're coming up on a break again. This is Mike Woods sitting in with Michelle for the CL Bryant Show. We'll be back. Welcome back to the C.L. Bryant Show. This is Mike Woods sitting in with Michelle, and we have Valerie Hodges, a state rep from Denham Springs, who has been impacted by the floods in more ways than one. Valerie, how are you?
Surviving, doing better than I was last Saturday.
Well, it's devastating to see the pictures, and obviously your house was one of the 87% of the houses in Livingston Parish that went underwater.
Yes, it was. We had 4 feet of water in our house, and lost all of our vehicles. My husband's truck was completely submerged underwater in our driveway, and we just were absolutely terrified because we woke up at 4 in the morning. All the electricity was out, and at first I thought the roof was leaking. And when I got out of bed, I'm like, wait, this is not a roof leaking.
The floor is leaking.
It was 6 inches. Yeah, exactly. It was 6 inches, and within 3 hours, it had come up to 3.5 feet. And we have an upstairs, so we went upstairs. But literally, we could see, the debris washing through the thing. We weren't sure if our house was going to wash off the slab. And I had 3 small children that I was very, very concerned about. But thankfully, about 11 o'clock, a boat showed up and pulled up on my front porch. And we were able to, they got us to safety. And then we went to another house and took showers because we'd been in that nasty, stinking water. And then we had to evacuate that house. And so because the water was coming up so fast, you literally could see it coming up. So we barely got out of that house in a vehicle and then tried to get out of Watson to get to safety in Baton Rouge, and there was no way out. Literally, we could not cross roads. We had to turn around, and somebody came from up near St. Helena and picked us up. And it has been absolutely crazy, just the devastation. And unfortunately, we don't live in a flood zone, so I would say probably 90% of the people in this area don't have flood insurance. And it is just absolutely devastating. People lost their cars, which most cars are covered, but the debris is in my yard. It's 10 feet high and 40 feet long.
So now has the water receded? Like you can actually walk in your home now? Have they been able to gut your home?
Oh, yes. We've been here since, this is day 10, I think. All day, every day working. I've had a lot of state rep friends come and help me, and it has been just such a blessing. And 2 of my sons showed up today to help us. So it's just a daunting task just to clean up. It was the worst part for us up here in Watson, and I don't really understand what it was, but everything was covered in mud and muck, and the smell. It was unbearable. The smell was unbearable.
We had a flood here in Shreveport back in '91, and had a good friend whose house was flooded, and I went in and helped. And people who've never been through a flood don't realize, your refrigerator floats and falls over. I mean, everything in your closet is ruined. All the sheetrock is ruined. And
absolutely, your hair dryer, all my makeup, stuff like that. All my shoes and my kids' shoes and teddy bears and dolls and
pictures and
and that's the heartbreaking part. Yeah.
Yes, my photos of my children. None of that. I asked my daughter. I said, "Did you get all the pictures?" And she thought I meant the pictures off her wall.
Yeah.
And she said yes. And then once we got up there, the water was 4 feet high in the house. And I said, "Kelly, where's the pictures?" And she's like, "Oh my God!" So they're all ruined, and there's no way to save them. That's
that's the heartbreaking part, because it's irreplaceable. Money cannot replace that. And like you said, so 90% are not covered. And we just talked with Billy. We've been keeping up on what's happening down there through Billy Nungesser and Garrett Graves. And I wanted to give you some time to kind of recover a little bit before we bombarded you.
Thank you, Michelle.
But like Mike is saying, they're talking about you all having to build your houses up a little bit. I mean, you're a state representative. You're used to representing people. What do you think we can do from here?
Well, there's no way that people can build their houses up, the ones that are here. We're on concrete slabs, and that would just be practically impossible. But what I have been working on in the legislature every year for the past 3 years, I have passed a resolution for a task force for the Comeet River Diversion Canal. And that brought together, because I had a meeting with DOTD, ARBC, which is the Comeet River Basin Commission, that was started to build this diversion canal, and the Corps of Engineers, and the city of Baton Rouge, and pushing that. And because I had separate meetings with all those entities, and everybody was blaming the other person. So I said, okay, enough of this finger pointing. We're going to have a task force, and they're going to testify under oath of what is going on and why this thing is not being built. We had $40 million sitting in a bank account that they said, oh, well, we're collecting a lot of interest. And I was like, that's bizarre. We're supposed to be building a canal. Now, this was 3 years ago. And so David Vitter flew in. He testified at my task force and just, reamed them out because David has been working on this and pushing this. So the Corps said, well, ARBC didn't buy the mitigation land. And DOTD said, well, until they buy the mitigation, we can't do anything. And the Corps said, well, we can't get money from the government until ARBC buys the mitigation land. And so it was this bureaucracy. And so, anyways, ARBC got off their behind and started buying the mitigation land. But the issue has been the Corps of saying, we don't have any money. And I said this in testimony. I figured it up, took a couple of days and put some statistics on it. And I said, we only need $200 million to finish this diversion canal that will divert the water from the Comite River and the Amite River over to the Mississippi River. And I said, it's not a matter of if we ever are going to have another 1983 flood. It's a matter of when. And it will be, my estimate was $2 billion for a catastrophic flood like we had in 83, but this is worse. I don't know. Nobody.
I was going to say, 1983, I hear this is a 500-year flood.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we had a flood like similar to, it was not even similar. There's no comparison. But it was about $1 billion in damage. And so I said, that's something like this. All we needed was $200 million, Mike. You think about that.
Yeah.
And a lot of this water would have been diverted. So where are we going to get the money? Somebody has got to be pushing for this. And, our congressional delegation that's been up there in Washington, this should have been a priority. But unfortunately, it has not been a priority, but I bet it will be now. And it has been...
We both agree with you. Odds are really good that you're right.
But it's a shame that 87% of the homes have to go underwater to get their attention.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Mike. And it's not just the water. I had a senator call me and say, well, our pipes broke one time when we were out of town and everything flooded. It's not the same as having sickening, disgusting backwater. Your toilets back up. And, so anyway, a flood is bad when your water pipes break, but it's nothing like everything. It was over my countertops filled with mud and fish. It's just sickening.
So now where do you live? You can't live in your home. People can't live in those homes,
No.
Mike, until...
No. Oh, no. You cannot live here. It's because right now, you can walk through the walls. We had to cut our sheetrock off at 4.5 feet.
Yeah.
And so, and there's nothing.
And it's going to be 6 months before you can get back in your house because you have to let it dry out before you can re-sheetrock.
Right.
Well, and Billy said something interesting to us about FEMA, that it was FEMA that looked at maps and said, oh, they don't need flood insurance. Are you aware of that FEMA made the recommendation?
Yeah, because this has never flooded. This area up here, in northern Livingston has never flooded. And many of the places in Baton Rouge has never flooded. So if you never flooded and everybody builds up real high, you don't expect to have this kind of problem. So anyway, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do now because my husband and I did have flood insurance.
Well, bless you, Valerie, for what you're going through. We're coming up on a break. We appreciate you taking the time and keep fighting the good fight.
Pray for us and pray for our community because we really need it. And
Thank you, ma'am.
Appreciate you guys.
You bet. Bye. Welcome back to the CL Bryant Show. This is Mike Woods sitting in for CL. Michelle, do we have a caller on the phone?
Actually, we do, and this is the time that we start taking calls. The number to call, Mike, do you know it?
320-5335.
Area code 318-320-5335. And I think we have one of your friends on the telephone, Tom Pace.
How are you, my friend?
Hello there, brother Mike Woods, Tom Pace, and yes, it's a beautiful day here, but South Louisiana is inundated, and I just want to give you an update on the fact that our North Shreveport Lions Club and partnering with other Lions international organizations is working in a relief effort down there in South Louisiana, and they have taken, food, and they're serving food and hot meals, and they're taking donations. So I just want everybody to know the Lions Club are working together to help with disaster relief and the flood relief down there to all those that are displaced.
Is there a website, Tom, that people can go to if they want to help?
Yeah, well, I don't have it's a Lions Club International. It's if you go to Lions Club International, that would be, you Google it up, and that will tell you. I do know that I know that you guys spoke with Lieutenant Governor Nungesser, and he told me it's volunteerlouisiana.org, volunteerlouisiana.org, if you wish to volunteer.
Yeah, we've been giving that website out. But, you're saying that if you're a Lions Club member anywhere in the state of Louisiana, then they can go to that website and they can help out.
And they can also donate money and or assistance for those people in South Louisiana, and also many of the realtors, as you well know, have taken supplies and things of that nature down there. And Reedy Barb and some of my friends that are members of the North Shreveport Lions Club have worked together to do that too. And Reed just told me that, Tom, it's so much worse than I even imagined. So prayers go out for them. Michael and Michelle, thanks for taking my call.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your help.
Well, and Mike, you were talking earlier about the Red Cross, because you've been on the Red Cross board for a long time.
Former chairman of the Red Cross, was actually chairman during the Bossier tornado and had to deal with the aftermath of the children that were killed and the trailer homes and other homes that were destroyed. And the Red Cross is getting some flack right now, and people don't understand. And some of the criticism is a result of a national organization, and I've had my problems with them as well. But there's some posts going around that I took this food there and they wouldn't serve it at the shelter. Well, the Red Cross, people don't realize when the Red Cross sets up a shelter, they have to provide 24-hour nursing care. During Katrina, we got a lot of criticism. Well, our church was going to open the shelter. Well, we didn't have a nurse to put there, so we couldn't open a Red Cross shelter. Now, as a church, if you wanted to shelter people, you could as your church, but you couldn't call it a Red Cross
because
shelter.
there's certain guidelines, and so that's the
there's
good
certain guidelines. We have to make certain, I remember the Bossier tornado. We showed up at the Bossier Civic Center. There were tons. People had dumped clothes and brought food. We didn't know where the food was from.
Right. You have to be very careful when it's a national thing like that because of safety. Now, we had Michelle in here last week when all this started. She runs the executive director of the local Red Cross, and she told us they feed people, but they take money. So if you're listening, you can go to the Red Cross and to their website and donate money, and then they go into the area that's affected, and they have people there that are preparing the food. What they ask from us in North Louisiana or anywhere you're listening around the country is that you donate money to the Red Cross, and then they will prepare the food so we know that it's not contaminated, and there's accountability. So it's a very simple, it makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. And yes, I understand why people get frustrated with us. We need help and you're not there to help us. But there is a protocol that the Red Cross has to follow.
That the Red Cross follows. And we're not saying that you can't do other things because all of us have friends down there. There are people with trailers with a grill on the top of the trailer cooking food and coolers and going down the street and doing that. And that's what makes us proud to be in Louisiana, that people would take the time to do that, and we can trust our neighbors that it's not poisonous.
There was an incredible video of the Cajun Navy launching their fishing boats off of Interstate 12 there in Denham Springs, which was all underwater, and the state police was allowing them to pull over on the shoulder and literally launch their boats to go. There were 30,000 people rescued, as we just heard from our previous caller, Valerie, who was rescued not once but twice. And these folks were down there of their own free will.
Their own gas, boats, insurance.
The Cajun
Some
Navy.
of them needed rescuing, different people that we've had on. And Rob Goudet, who helped found the Cajun Navy, is a good friend of ours. So we've had him on the show as well and hooked him up with Sean Hannity. And
2 minutes.
it's been it is amazing to me how organized and how peaceful the looting, anybody that tries to loot, the Livingston Parish Sheriff said, don't think that because we're busy with flooding that we're not going to be seriously heavy-handed with you. And there hasn't been looting.
And the media was so quick, Michelle, to come into Baton Rouge after the Alton Sterling shooting, after the shooting of the police officers, and of course the Black Lives Matter folks showed up, but they haven't been back to help.
Well, we want them to come back and come and help with the rescue effort. Al Sharpton, Soros-paid protesters, we welcome you back. You don't have to protest. You can take your protest signs and make them into little boats or help build with them, but we want them back.
Good for you.
Well, and tell them the phone number again so they can call in and ask you questions. And when we come back from this break, we're going to talk about the price of oil.
Yes, 318-320-5335, 318-320-5335.
And right now we want to thank some of our sponsors, one of them being Grub Burger. Have you ever eaten at Grub Burger?
I have not eaten a Grub Burger.
Okay, you have to go this week while you're in town.
Holmes European, Bailey's Jeweler, Tiger Axle, Daytac Custom Arms, Chevyland, Subway, Yoakum Toyota.
And at Grub Burger, when you go, you say, I listen to the
I'm
CL
hungry.
Bryant show. No, you say CL Bryant. You can say, I am CL Bryant, and they give you a free shake. So you need to go there tomorrow and say, because you do listen to the show, and you go in and you mention CL Bryant, and they will give you a free chocolate shake.
All righty. Thank you much. We will be back after the break. This is Mike Wood sitting in with Michelle on the CL Bryant Show.
Very superstitious, writings on the wall. Very superstitious, let us doctors fall.
Welcome back to the CL Bryant Show. This is Mike Woods sitting in for CL Bryant. If you have a comment, 320-5335, 318-320-5335. Sitting here with Michelle. You know, this weekend I was in beautiful Level Land, Texas, sitting on a rig that was drilling a 10,500-foot test. And as I'm sitting here looking at the markets, oil is down 50 cents today, closed at, let's see, what did it close? 47.59. But it's been rallying a little bit recently because it appears that OPEC may be trying to freeze production limits. And that, of course, anybody who remembers Econ 101 knows supply and demand. And if the supply is curtailed and the demand increases, the price goes up. So hopefully there's some good news on the horizon for oil prices.
Iran is going to be sitting in at OPEC. Have they been at OPEC this whole time?
Yes.
So there has never been sanctions by OPEC for Iran.
Well,
it's just been us putting sanctions on them in other countries. So the Iran deal didn't affect that in any way.
Well, so theoretically Iran couldn't sell any of their oil, but what happens is that on the black market, they put in a tanker and they say, oh, it's not from Iran, it's from Nigeria, and we'll give you a good deal if you buy it. So their oil has been on the market, but now that the sanctions have been lifted,
now they can come out and say they're doing it. But you're saying that even with the sanctions there that we put there, and the United Nations, this was a collaborative effort to put sanctions, and we just allowed them to do it illegally.
Well, and look, where does the money go from the OPEC crude? I mean, it's used to fund the militants and the ISIS and everybody else. I mean, it amazes me as a country that we continue to do business with OPEC, but I'm prejudiced.
Well, why is that? Because you think we could be independent, oil independent.
We were headed toward energy independence. Had the prices not collapsed, we've already lost since the downfall in crude prices in the last 2 years. We have lost 1 million barrels of production a day here in the United States. We were headed for complete energy independence by 2020, had prices maintained, and we were allowed to continue drilling. But as a result of the drop from $100 a barrel to $40, our rig count drilling for oil has gone from 1,800 rigs. This week it was 401. So that's a pretty precipitous drop there. And the bottom line is that this is an extremely capital-intensive business. You can't borrow money to drill for oil. You have to have either cash flow or reserves to do it, or you go bankrupt.
Well, let me say this, though. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the 80s, in the early to mid-'80s, Utica National Bank had an energy lending department. And you just hit the nail on the head. Now, when the price went down in the 80s, there was a fluctuation of the price of oil, whenever that was. Well, that took down Utica National Bank with it. Because that was when I learned that you cannot lend for energy because oil is speculation.
Took down a lot of banks. Took down Penn Square.
Yes, it did in Oklahoma City.
Yeah,
I remember this all well.
And my father used to always tell me, son, banks will loan you more money than you can pay back. So remember that. And so anybody with any kind of debt structure is in a world of hurt right now, because when you have crude dropping from $100 a barrel to 40, your cash flow is gone, and you have other expenses you have to maintain. But this is not the first time. Those of us that have been in the business, I've been doing this since 1974. I'm either very smart or very dumb. I don't know what. But
do you want me to answer that?
Well,
no. Okay, all right.
But the bottom line is that those of us that have continued to be in the business have learned that you can't operate with any debt. You've got to live off your cash flow, and when times are good, you have to drill a lot of wells and find more oil, and when times are bad, you pull in the horns and watch your expenses, and that's where we are right now. Unfortunately, this has been the longest period of time that this has gone on, and it has this great state impact, our budget.
Right. Well, let's talk about that, and that's part of it. So it's $47 a barrel right now.
Well, that's futures prices. Probably posted price here for North Louisiana is probably about 43 or 44. The good news is that this year's budget finally, the Revenue and Estimating Conference, predicated our 2016-17 budget on $30 crude oil. So right now, if it's 43, 44 for every dollar over that $30, that's an extra $12 million to the state for the year. So right now, as far as crude oil is concerned, we are running a surplus because of royalties collected and severance taxes collected. The bad news is because of this flooding in South Louisiana, we have shut down a lot of jobs. We have closed a lot of stores. Sales tax, once we start rebuilding, is going to bring some money into the state coffers. But in the meantime, nobody's getting paid. Nobody's paying state income tax. Nobody's paying sales tax. Now, you will see, just as we had with Katrina, with all the cars that went under, as people buy new cars, there will be sales tax paid on those cars. And remember, we have
So we want them to come up to North Louisiana to buy their cars. Okay.
Yep, and remember, there's an extra penny sales tax on vehicles and lumber.
Well, we're going to talk about that with our guest at the top of the hour, State Representative Thomas Carmody. He's on the Commerce Committee, and he wants to talk to us about that penny sales tax. And then I asked the question, I hope this isn't a bad taboo thing to tell our listeners, but what about waiving some of that sales tax when you're talking about I'm getting money from the insurance company, like Valerie. She is insured. So you're getting your money back from the insurance company, and then we're going to tax them on that money?
Well, there are precedents of waiving sales tax, as we discussed earlier today. Coming up Labor Day weekend, there is a waiver on hunting equipment, and a lot of folks buy ATVs and guns and everything else for the Labor Day weekend because of the sales tax waiver. We waive sales tax on back-to-school supplies every year.
I don't know if you can compare sales tax on back-to-school supplies and hunting, but I think maybe 100 years ago or more, people hunted because of food. Now it's more entertainment, but it is nice when we take a break and not charge people. And another thing, we get a lot of phone calls about FEMA. People don't understand that FEMA is tax dollars that are gathered from us, the taxpayers, and then set aside by the federal government.
No question, it is our money, and it's going to be interesting as we go forth with Steve Scalise as his majority whip position in the House has been a fiscal conservative, and now all of a sudden he's denied some funding to other states, and now he's going to be on the asking end of the equation. So it's going to be interesting.
Well, we'll talk about
forward.
that in the next block with you, exactly what that means.
Okay.
Because people need to understand that FEMA is not welfare.
No, it's not welfare. It's the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and they are in charge of under Homeland Security, and will be here in Louisiana for quite some time as we deal with the aftermath of the Great Flood. This is Mike Woods. I'm sitting in for C.L. Bryant with Michelle, and we'll be back after the break.
Make you burn, gonna make you stay.
Welcome back to the C.L. Bryant Show. This is Mike Woods sitting in with Michelle, and we have State Representative Thomas Carmody on the phone with us. Thomas, how are you, my friend?
I'm very well, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. You've got an even bigger job now with this flooding that we have going on in South Louisiana. We had Valerie Hodges on, one of your Republican counterparts in the House, and of course her house went underwater a couple of times.
Bless she and her family.
You know, yeah. You serve on Commerce Committee as we go forth and deal with the issues as a result. What are we going to do now, man?
Well, as I was explaining to Michelle before we came on the air, that I think one of the things we're going to experience as a state is that Katrina effect, and that for all those persons who now have lost all their possessions, those that can afford to are going to be replacing them. And since there has now been a 1% increase in our state sales tax, that revenue is going to come in. And again, that's just a bubble. I mean, it's not a sustainable type source of revenue. And I know that John Bell is trying to convince the president to allow us to pay 10 cents on the dollar as opposed to the
25 cents.
25 cents.
Yeah.
I think American people in their heart of hearts understand hardship when it happens to their fellow Americans.
Thomas, explain that to our listeners because they might not understand it. How do you break that down? The $10 on what dollar versus the 25?
Well, what we're looking at there is that right now, as far as the federal relief that would be coming in to the state, that the federal government would pay 75 cents on each dollar, and the state would start to put up the other quarter. What John Bell has asked the president to consider, and I know that he's lobbying our congressional delegation, is to try to get some relief on that amount. And as we're all aware of the current financial situation in the state, we don't even have the 25 cents.
Well, we don't even have the 10 though, really.
Correct. But again, I think that what you're going to end up seeing is, and this will, just like any natural disaster, this one is not going to be something that is cured between now and Christmas. This will be something that'll be years in the making. I was thinking about Valerie Hodges and her family, as well as Rogers Pope, and I know Dale Erdy. All three of their homes there in South Louisiana were wiped out. And even if the check were to come from your insurance company, that doesn't make you whole, first and foremost, and nor does it put you back in your house immediately.
Well, and Thomas, you hit on a very important point that we overlooked as we got through the Katrina bubble, as you called it, with the extra $10 billion worth of federal funds that came in, and the state coffers that were full because of people buying new automobiles and paying sales tax and whatever, and we became flush and living on that cash and kept basing budgets as if it was going to continue. And then when it goes away, that's when the wheels come off, and that's when we have $1.5 billion deficit, a $2 billion deficit, and then we start scrambling with extra sales tax and other taxes to meet the state needs.
And Mike, think about it like this. I mean, if it was during my business and we sustained a catastrophic loss, and that's going to be something that, of course, hopefully we're insured, but let's just say for sake of argument that, like so many in Louisiana, they don't have insurance. And those families and those individuals, I mean, God help them. I mean, and we got to be God's hands in that request, because it's going to take all of us trying to put those people back on their feet. But to imagine the housing stock that no longer exists or is so damaged that it's not inhabitable, and then the persons that are scrambling trying to find something other than shelter that's being offered to them through these charitable organizations, I mean, their lives are upside down.
Well, and we've got schools that are closed. I mean, you're going to have, again, just like Katrina, you're going to have people that leave the state of Louisiana and never come back.
Correct. I think that is probably what we're seeing. And if what I had read today is, and I think it is correct from Baton Rouge Advocate, was that basically it is 500,000 citizens that are affected by this. And if you think about 500,000 and the 4.2 million of us that are here. I mean, that is a substantial amount of the population that is just in dire straits.
Well, and there's so many logistical issues. I'm reading that the Baker School will be closed for a year. So where do you take those kids to educate them?
What do you do at that point? I mean, because those families that don't have the financial means to move away, first and foremost, how do you educate your children? I mean, are the local, the surrounding school districts going to be able to pick that up? And believe you me, after serving 2 terms on the House Education Committee, most districts are going to tell you they don't have enough money to take care of the children they're responsible for.
Exactly. Yeah. And how do you get them there?
The logistics of it all is just it's hard to fathom. It really is.
Well, I was in Baton Rouge right before all this started, and fortunately got out like 2 days before the deluge. And I mean, I can't even imagine seeing some of the pictures of flooding, around Tiger Stadium and down Nicholson Drive, and to see people launching their boats off of Interstate 12 and Denham Springs. I mean, it's just incredible. You can't believe that there could be that much water, but 31 inches of rain in 3 days, it has no place to go.
And my sisters Bridget and Marie both live in Baton Rouge, and thanks be to God, although they were inconvenienced and many of their neighbors, inundated, they were not.
Yeah.
But they're kind of the exception to the rule when it comes down to where they live and the areas, those areas of Baton Rouge, because as Bridget told me, she said, Thomas, the bizarre part about it is you can drive 5 miles from where they live right there at I-12 at O'Neill Lane. You can drive 5 miles and it looks like nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
Life goes on, just like it did before the rain started.
Yeah.
And yet you that 5 miles back to ground zero, and those lives are upside down.
And will be.
I don't know if y'all had seen what Kenny Havard had proposed, and I think that it is something that I cannot imagine the federal government not getting behind. But for those persons that have their retirement, to have the ability to access their retirement funds without
penalty. Great idea.
I mean, that is only humane.
Yep. All right, Thomas, we're coming up on a break. We appreciate all that you do, and you're going to have your plate full once again, my friend. Thanks for being on the show. Welcome back to the CL Bryant Show. This is Mike Woods sitting in for CL, who will be back in tomorrow night. I understand Sean Hannity will be on the show as well, Michelle.
Yes, he will be.
One of the things that, as we have been in conversation with State Rep Thomas Carmody and as well as State Representative Valerie Hodges and Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser, the faith-based community has really stepped up to the plate in all this. And you and I had this conversation this afternoon. There are a lot of things that the government is there to help us with, but there are a lot of things that the government just simply can't do. And oftentimes it is the faith-based community that steps up. We had the privilege of being included in a conversation with the Congressman Steve Scalise yesterday and the Louisiana Family Forum with Gene Mills as the faith-based community was asking questions of FEMA and of state officials as to what they needed to do to help the process. And as a person of faith, and Michelle, I know you are as well, it's what we do. It's what we're commanded to do. And oftentimes, and as you know, I've been involved in the not-for-profit world for years and taught nonprofit management at LSUS as a graduate level course. But one of the things that always amazes me is that oftentimes problems like homelessness, it's hard to say, okay, we're going to solve the homeless problem. But you can solve the problem with John or Joe who's homeless. And I think that's oftentimes what our churches have the ability to step up. They may not be able to address homelessness per se, but they can take care of that individual that needs help. And that's what we're commanded to do.
Well, let's
by
talk
our
about the
faith.
Homelessness. As a matter of fact, a local young man that owns Bon Temp Coffee Shop, that's downtown in the Red River District. Have you been there?
No, I have not.
He's actually a person who was in law enforcement. I'll just say it that way, nice and vague, because you're allowed to own a business and be a public servant as well. And he wrote a piece that I'm going to share with you, and maybe we'll have him on with you the next time that you're here, where he talks about homelessness. And he has that coffee shop in the Red River District on purpose to help eliminate crime. And he said and asked people not to just feed a homeless person, but to bring them to the shelters and the people that are experts on not how to just feed them for the day, but intervene in their life to create intervention so that they have a life-changing experience and they're no longer homeless. And like you said, you've been in the nonprofit world. You've been on the board of everything and things to do with homelessness and,
served on the Board of Rescue Mission for years. My wife was chairman of the Providence House during Katrina. And it's going to be interesting to see as a result of this flood. As a result of Katrina, Providence House suddenly had 300 additional families to house. Well, they didn't have the facilities to house 300. And so my wife, along with Simone Hennessy and others on the board, did a bunch of scrambling and went out and found homes and apartments to suddenly deal with this sudden influx of people who were displaced from their homes in New Orleans. So we're going to see that again. But again, back to my initial issue, Providence House can't help solve the problem of homelessness, but they can help Mrs. Susie whatever and Mr. John whatever address their issue of homelessness. I mean, it's one family at a time, and that's what has excited me. Even though I hate that we have to go through a disaster like this to get Republicans and Democrats to work together and solve the problems, but it does make me proud, having grown up in the state and having been involved in a lot of the entities that are down in South Louisiana helping. I mean, it makes you feel good. And
so you're saying that it's the individuals working with the organizations. And that is one of your mantras. Newt Gingrich, the last time you were on, we posted that on our website. What did Newt Gingrich say about the individual?
Well, Newt Gingrich said, government can't solve the problem because government doesn't know Mary. And for instance, with homelessness, I mean, there are a lot of different reasons that people are homeless. And so to come up with a blanket solution, we'll just give them a place to live. Well, some of them don't want to get off the streets.
Right. There's a lot of reasons.
Some of them
why
have
people are
alcohol
homeless.
issues. Some of them have
Exactly.
drug
You
issues.
You see people giving them money, but this is not 1935 during the deep, dark Depression days. There are jobs. I mean, if you open the Shreveport Times, there's still jobs that are out there. People are looking for work. Now, we've got so many other issues to deal with, but when you see somebody on a street corner, there are organizations. And we need to do that more when you're here. And we do that with CL. We're really looking for solutions because as Republicans, we're small government people. We want to empower the local community locally to take care of its people, whether it's education, homelessness, people, fires, police. We want it all to be on the local level. So that's just part of it. And it is beautiful to see what's happening in Baton Rouge. People are talking about it around the nation. Sean Hannity did an hour show yesterday from Baton Rouge, and he mainly interviewed people that had been displaced or volunteers that had come to rescue. And it was just remarkable. And actually, Lieutenant Governor Nungesser did make a joke that was really funny. To Sean Hannity, and he said, "Yeah, well, just let the government give us maybe some of that 400 billion or 400 million that they gave to the Iranians.
Yeah,
just give us some of that. We'll just take some of that. Yeah, it could be. We'll give it to you as whatever.
It's great to see a spirit of cooperation. I saw today that the Food Bank of Northwest Louisiana is sending a 53-foot trailer load of water and meals ready to eat down to Greater Baton Rouge Food Bank. So again, nonprofits cooperating with other nonprofits, and that's what it's all about.
FEMA is not going to be able to take care of this loss. Billy Nungesser told us that last week. They're only giving $33,000 to people.
Samaritan Purse fed 55,000 hot meals last week, 31,000 volunteer hours, so people are coming out of the woodwork to help. This is Mike Wood sitting in for C.L. Bryant. We will be back. If you have a question, 320-5335, 318-320-5335. Thank you. Welcome back to the CL Bryant Show. This is Mike Woods sitting in the studio with Michelle, filling in for CL, who will be back in tomorrow night, and encourage the audience to tune in when CL comes back to town. Michelle, I'm looking at an article about gender inclusive classrooms now, and help me understand we can no longer refer to students as boys and girls. What's going on?
Yeah, I can't answer that question. The whole thing is ridiculous. If you notice, the only time that they're big sticklers about gender is when you have Bruce Jenner wanting to be called a woman. So you're forced and politically incorrect if you don't use the word she or he when you're talking to a transgender person, but they don't want you to use the names boys and girls in classrooms. And there's the University of West Virginia. We're looking into this to make sure that it's an accurate report, but told their students that they're breaking federal law. This is what the University of West Virginia, this was written actually today, and it said that they are breaking the law if they don't use transgender phrases. Instead of he or she, use Z or...
Z.
Yeah, Z-I-R, zer, or her. Who knows? And this is by Dr. Susan Berry. She wrote this report. So, and we have a guest host that is a family therapist, and he's going to bring on some psychiatrists with him, because this is absurd. You know, we've got real problems in the world. We've got ISIS at our back door. We have all kinds of things happening. We have a Zika virus in Miami, and then we're going to be freaking out because a school teacher. Now, the other articles we pulled up, you and I, these are elementary school children. Don't call them boys and girls. What? And what kind of parents are so gullible that they don't know that that's an absurdity? Before we change the way that we've done this for the history of mankind, why don't you give me documentation to tell me why we can't do this? Instead of me saying, oh my God, I feel guilty because I know that I'm a girl. You know, I have a theory on this. You're a girl, no matter what. If you're a girl, if you don't like to bake cookies, that's fine. I don't think that things are, behavior is masculine or feminine. I think people are. And CL taught me that. Chromosomes. That's CL's big thing. Your chromosomes. So if a girl likes to
either XX or XY.
That's what he says. And he says if a girl likes to, chop wood, that doesn't make her a boy. Who tells you that things are gender? If a person likes to cut hair, that's not for boys or girls. That's for a person. I mean, many chefs are males.
You know, during the transgender bathroom debate, one of the best comments I saw is, the best way to address the transgender bathroom issue, portalettes. They're transgender. Just instead of having bathrooms everywhere, just put portalettes out in the parking lot and have at it.
Yeah, I wouldn't go for that. Yeah, but now we will announce that Target has suffered a great deal of financial loss because of that, and now they're installing, and I'm not sure the exact details, but this came out last week, they're going to be installing like a separate bathroom so that for people that know what their gender is and want to keep the one they were born with, and then that's okay. I mean, this whole conversation is absurd. And the fact that people randomly, they're called, what was that little pamphlet? The Human Rights Coalition put out a pamphlet to say, don't call them boys and girls teachers because you might offend someone.
They're
I am
students.
offended that they wrote the pamphlet.
Well, political correctness has gone way too far, and it's like every day somebody wakes up and comes up with some protest or something that offends them. And I don't know how I've lived these 63 years without being offended constantly, but, I have,
I think we have to learn how to have a thick skin. Speaking of offended, I'm offended that Hillary Clinton is doing a fundraiser in Shreveport. My idea is whoever is putting on that fundraiser, is it this Friday night?
This Friday night.
And the speakers are two former Democrat.
You have Senator Tom Harkin, former U.S. Senator from Iowa, whose claim to fame was his comment that he flew combat missions in Vietnam, and come to find out he was stationed in Japan
with Brian Adams and Hillary. They were on this, and Ryan Lochte.
And the other is former U.S. Congressman Tony Coelho, who was the House Majority Whip, who had to resign after 6 terms in office for receiving monies from a savings and loan exec to buy junk bonds.
And so these are the celebrities that are coming to this fundraiser to collect money for Hillary. I have one thing to say. whoever's listening right now, turn that fundraiser for Hillary and do something good for Louisiana and say instead of, now how much is it a person?
Well, it starts out at $1,000 and goes to $10,000.
That money could be well used. Send it directly down to South Louisiana. How could she be doing a fundraiser? Now, she's not attending, so this is just for her campaign. And let me remind you what that money goes to. It goes to pay salaries for campaign people that don't know what's happening in America. It goes to pay for more of those commercials you don't want to see. So don't you recommend, like I do, I think she'd get more bang for her buck if she said, turn that North Louisiana fundraiser into money for South Louisiana flood victims.
But
and you heard it here first on the C.L. Bryant Show.
She hadn't been to South Louisiana, so she doesn't know what's going on. The great thing about living in Louisiana and also with Texas and Arkansas, we're not going to be inundated with a lot of
those ads that we don't want to see. So she's taking money from North. That's my point. She's taking our money.
Yeah.
$1,000 a person, and that's the beginning tier.
It'll go to
Send
North
it
Carolina.
to the flood victims and say, we're not giving you the money, Hillary. In your name, we're making a donation to the flood victims.
For the cause. All right, this is Mike Wood sitting in with Michelle for C.L. Bryant. We'll be back after the break. Thank you.
What do you do when you get lonely? Nobody's waiting by your side. You've been running, fighting much too long. You know it's just your foolish stride.
Welcome back to the CL Bryant Show. This is Mike Woods sitting in for CL, and Michelle and I have had an interesting couple of hours.
It's been an interesting time, and CL has to travel a lot. Do you realize he has not had a vacation in 2 years? Every time he's away on business, he does travel around the country trying to help the cause. So the guy hasn't had a vacation. He's just been here doing the show or out there doing good things.
And if you ever have a chance to see CL in person, either through Freedom Works or any other times when he's out speaking, he is incredible in front of an audience. I mean, he really comes alive. So I would encourage you, and I know many of y'all in the listening office audience have seen him in person, but he's a great guy, and I appreciate the opportunity of sitting in for him while he's gone.
Yeah, well, he's a celebrity outside of Shreveport because I do a lot of this interfacing around the country, and let me just tell you, and when he comes to speak at these places, the feedback is best speaker ever, best speaker there. It doesn't matter where it was. He's just that man, that guy. So it's a privilege that we get him here every night on the air.
And tomorrow night we have Sean Hannity calling into the show.
That's why CL has to be here because he has to do that interview.
He has to take the call.
That's right. And but let's back to this flood raiser. So instead of a fundraiser for Hillary, we're going to call it a flood raiser, and we encourage them to take that money and do something good with it. And I don't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat. I'm totally against the fact that it costs millions of dollars to run for office. That seems to be counterintuitive. If this is supposed to be a government for and by the people, why are we spending all that money, giving it to these people? Why don't they just go door to door, kind of connect with people like in the olden days and get to know people?
And how many ads changed people's mind? I mean,
yeah, you know how it changes their mind? I don't want to see another one of those. That's right.
Well,
I don't even like that guy now.
And now with all of the additional groups that are throwing money, you really never know who's paying for the ad. I mean, it drives me crazy. That's why I just watch the Weather Channel.
Yeah, well, tell us what predicting the weather for tomorrow.
Well, it's supposed to be pretty tomorrow.
Well, good.
Very slight chance of rain, but the rain's coming back Thursday and Friday. So,
I mean, people around, and yet in California, they need water.
They're burning up.
If somebody could find a way to take our water and ship it to California.
Well, it was interesting. I spent the weekend in Spur, Texas, on a rig, and my yard in Spur. The first I've owned that house since '04. It is the first August I've ever seen green grass in my yard. There's been so much rain,
and we're so used to the color green. It grows on trees here. It grows in the house. Well, we're green.
we're all molding here.
Yes.
My grass is about 4 feet tall because my yard guy hadn't been able to cut the grass. Well, anyway, thanks for the listening audience for putting up with us tonight. Michelle, thank you for putting up with me, and I want to thank everybody out in the listening audience, our armed forces who are serving our country, both men and women. Our police and firemen who are working all of the rescue efforts going on in South Louisiana, the electricians, all the utility workers, and bless those that have been displaced and have lost their homes and their vehicles, and God bless them and watch over them and keep them. This is Mike Woods sitting in for CL. Thank you.